Thanks for listening to Draw Near with Fred and Kara. And as you can clearly hear my voice, I am back for episodes.
Kara, I'm so excited that you're back. We're having to do this by Zoom, so it's a little bit of a flashback for us. It's like, this is how we started.
The old days. Yeah.
But it's just, it's so nice to hear your voice coming over the music again, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners agree. I'm just happy to have my bestie back on Draw Near.
I feel like everyone can kind of hear it in your voice. So Fred clearly has a stressed voice. It's because he's been doing these episodes by himself. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yep.
Yeah. If he gets a little crazy, it's because he's had 2 hot toddies today, which means there's been some whiskey.
Yeah, which feels amazing on my throat, though, to be honest with you.
Yeah. It'll make for a good intro. It's fine.
In my defense, a religious sister did give me this recipe and say that it helped very much with her colds. So
I'm pretty sure you gave me the recipe too, but I got like a trash whiskey, so it wasn't very good.
You got to get the good stuff, Kara.
Yeah.
What was it I texted you earlier before we started recording? It's like sister is sprinkling fairy dust on my throat or something like that with every sip.
Yeah. But she's alive, so like, sprinkling from where?
Right,
I was thinking like heaven.
Yeah,
but
it's the magic of her recipe. But my throat is feeling like, even though my voice sounds like this, trust me, this is light years better than it was. So the fact that
That's
I keep
good.
walking around singing Johnny Cash songs to my kids, why I sound like this, probably is not helping my voice too much. But
yeah, probably not. So speaking of kids, that's kind of what this episode is about. How'd you guys like that transition? That was pretty good.
That was good, Kara.
So this episode, we have a guest, Fred and a good friend of ours get to have a conversation together about exactly that, about their kids and about fatherhood. So Fred, can you tell a little bit about the guest and a little like teaser about what this segment coming up is going to be about?
Yes. So once again, it's Phillip Grothus, who you may remember as the communications director for St. Francis of Assisi Parish in West Des Moines. He is also a fellow Cobra Kai superfan. So we're really excited to have him on because it gives us one.
Did he finish the whole series in a couple days too?
He has more virtue than we do, Kara. He is doing one episode a week. And I'm like,
good for him.
Good for him. I wish I was that holy. I really do. But him and his daughter, it's a special thing every week that they watch together. So I think that's so beautiful. But we also have another special guest, Kara. Who's the special guest that's cooing into the microphone as we speak?
Aggie. She is currently sleeping on me, but kind of making noises. Yeah, hello. So it's probably better that she's with me than crying in the crib. So yeah, you'll kind of hear her probably actually in a couple of the upcoming episodes because it's a little bit... She's a little bit, I don't know, kind of going through some rough things, and it's just probably better and easier for her to snuggle up. So she might be around in some of the episodes.
Amen. We love to hear those coos, though, so that's cute, Kara.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of a spoiler warning, but I think it's good to say, how we've done this series on marriage and family life in honor of Aggie. We also have, Kara, you're going to do the same thing with the moms and the wives soon, aren't you?
I am. Yes, I am. So one of the episodes that Fred got to do is actually with my husband. And so I am going to do the same thing. Crystal and I are going to get to sit down and talk about motherhood and hopefully some other special guests and moms in the battlefield with us. And we'll kind of get to talk about being a wife and being a mother and what that's like for all of our listeners. And I think it's good, honestly, for female listeners, but also for male listeners, just like I'm sure many of our female listeners are going to really enjoy kind of getting a father's perspective too. So it should be good. Yeah,
that's awesome. I'm looking forward to it, Kara. And then we'll wrap up with couples talking a little bit as couples. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. We've got some friends lined up to join us for that, and we're really looking forward to that. But in the meantime, Phillip Grothus. Back to Phillip Grothus. We got a little sidetracked. That might be the hot toddies talking, Kara. I'm not sure. But yeah, we're excited. So we're going to transition to the Phillip Grothus. I got to say before I introduce any guest, Kara.
Is that what they tell you?
I just want them to feel special.
Oh, okay. That's good. Now, not to throw anyone off, I am not in the interview, but I did want to be here to introduce because I miss everybody and it's good to be back. So, and I'll be back in the other episodes, but Fred and Phillip do such a great job. So hope you enjoy listening.
So once again, we are blessed to have Phillip Grothus from the St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Church in West Des Moines, Iowa, joining us for this discussion on fatherhood, being a dad. We intend this especially for those who may be new dads or those who are thinking about possibly someday being a dad, but we also think this will be a blessing to all dads who listen, and we're hoping everyone else will enjoy this discussion as well. What do you think, Phillip?
Oh man, I'm in for this ride. This is going to be great.
So I want to dive in with a deep question as we begin today.
Well, strike hard, strike fast, no mercy, sir.
As I wore my Cobra Kai shirt in honor of you.
Yes.
You started off before we started recording. You said, I am underdressed seeing you wearing your Cobra Kai shirt, which I wore in honor of you.
Thank you, sir.
But for the listeners, you're wearing a bow tie. So
I am wearing a bow tie.
Which one of us is actually underdressed for this occasion?
Well, it's got to be me because I am overdressed, I guess you could say. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm doing I rolled out of bed and put on a Cobra Kai shirt and got on here with you. But I did choose this shirt because it's you, and we love Cobra Kai. And September 9th is on the horizon, which by the time you're listening to this, we've already seen the first episode or more.
And it is epic.
We're a little bit excited. Shameless plug. I don't know if everybody listening likes Cobra Kai, but clearly we do. So, you're a dad.
Yes, sir.
How many kids do you have?
I have a plethora of kids.
A plethora of
kids. I've got a house full of boys and girls that keep me busy and love and life, laughter, and the pursuit of happiness.
Nice. I'm trying to figure out is there a technical word for a lot of kids? Like, is it a gaggle? Is it a gander? Is it a plethora? I don't know. Well, I feel like there should be a word for this.
I always go with plethora just because I'm so fixated on the movie The Three Amigos. You know, the line of a plethora of piñatas. Nice. So any chance, that's the biggest word I know is plethora. Okay.
That works. Yeah. Yeah, that works. It's all a lot. And I'm sure you get the question, are these all yours? I don't know. If you're all together, do you get that question?
I do. And I love them all. So yeah, they're all mine. Yeah. Because I love them all.
My favorite response for that question, and I hope it doesn't offend anybody listening, but my favorite response is, we love our hobbies.
Oh my gosh. Children are not hobbies, but no, it's funny. You definitely see your lens through your kids.
Right, yeah.
You pick up their hobbies, even though you may or may not have liked them. I had 2 girls to start off with. And when the third one was being born, it's well, you want a boy, right? I'm I don't know what I would do with a boy.
Right. Yeah.
I'm perfectly happy continuing tea parties and dress up and being that type of a dad.
You were blessed among women.
It was great. Yeah. I love it.
Yes. So when you learned you were going to be a dad for the first time, and maybe every time, but especially that first time, what was your initial reaction to learning that you were going to be a dad?
Oh, I was so happy, so excited. And I don't know about you, but I was totally petrified of being a dad at the beginning process. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Finances, time frames. Am I really ready? And then that moment you hear it slowly melts away. Right. But then the moment I held Mila, who is my oldest, it was why was I ever worried?
Right.
That is silly. Yeah. It's so silly.
Mila, who loves your dad jokes, right?
Oh my goodness, Mila, I love you, babe. Please listen through the entire episode because it's going to be epic.
Nice. I think that was it's funny that you describe it that way because that was my response as well. It was initially, wow, excitement. And then, oh my gosh, I'm scared. And then excited and then scared.
Yep.
And then I don't know, some sentimentality kind of settled into where I started writing notes to our first. I've always wanted to be a dad and write these sweet notes. And then as more children pile up and come along, it gets harder to do that, those sort of sentimental things. But
yep.
I share your sentiment in that, the moment I held her for the first time, because I was in college at the time. She was born during final exams, actually, and it was a lot of fear for me. Oh, what am I going to do? How? But the moment I held her, all that went away. So, any dads listening, or new dads, or dads to be, it's normal to be excited and scared at the same time. So that's how you would answer that.
Totally. Totally. Oh my goodness. I would, and it wouldn't be it wouldn't be unnormal if you felt just one way. It's just how I
Right.
felt and how
Yeah.
you felt. But don't feel ashamed
Exactly.
if
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
having
it's okay to
doubts.
be scared. Yep. I think some of the best moments in my life have been preceded by similar feelings of excitement and absolute terror. Like right now, actually, like
Yeah.
the life changes, that we talked about on a recent episode. So that's okay. That's
Hmm.
normal. So what perceptions of what being a dad means and that you might carry with you, whether it's from our culture or your experience growing up, like how do you think that shaped your perception of being a dad?
Okay. So my dad was always around and always fixing things. He was a handyman. He was great about that because that
Mm.
was his profession. He was a teacher, an industrial arts teacher, an electrical teacher for the junior high. So he knew his stuff. So when it came to building things in the garage and fixing things around the house, that was his thing. So I was there holding a screwdriver, holding the screws whenever they came out or putting them in. So I picked up a lot of things just
Mm.
watching him do things. So that was what I had gravitated towards. And I've hugely learned the amount of patience
Mm.
he had with me is incredible because I get frustrated. Well, I can hang the
Hmm.
ceiling fan myself. And Kelly wants Luke to help me, my youngest. It's in his room. Well, he's got to hold a
Hmm.
flashlight. Like, is that really helpful? But yet,
Right.
that's what I
Yeah,
did
that's
when I was
absolutely helpful.
little.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Hmm.
really helpful. So I saw that, and now I'm starting to learn that the culture of a dad, we need to fight what secular
Hmm.
culture is breathing
Right.
down our necks of the
Right.
bumbling idiot. If you really look at a lot of how dads or male role models are portrayed, like I'm gonna go to my
Hmm.
other favorite show,
Nice.
Saved by the Bell.
Uh-huh.
Zach Morris, you never really see his dad except for
Hmm.
like one episode, but Mr. Belding is that
Hmm.
father figure
Right.
for Zach Morris. And he is just like a funny side character,
Yeah. Yeah.
bumbling idiot with very few insightful thoughts for Zach Morris and the rest of the gang. Is that really how we
Right.
should be
Yeah.
portrayed
Hmm.
as men? So it's fighting that culture of being
Right.
a
Yeah.
bumbling
Yeah. That
idiot.
is definitely the perception we're working against. Homer Simpson's the first one that comes to mind for me, and honestly,
Yeah.
I do have my Homer Simpson moments, certainly.
Oh,
But
yeah,
but I
like they're
also have my
there.
Charles Ingalls moments. My own experience, I can think of similar things. Like my stepdad, I should say, because that's who I grew up with, was definitely very handy, but it was also like very complicated experience. Like, yeah, I would hold the flashlight, but I would also learn every word that you're not supposed to say. Every single cuss word I learned from my stepdad, while holding a flashlight for him.
Oh
And I remember
wow.
when he passed away, and I got some of his tools and I brought him home. And my third daughter picked up the hammer that he had, and she held it in her hands, and she asked what it
Oh
was, because it was the
no.
first time she'd really seen a hammer. She was pretty little, and
Uh-huh.
I said, that was daddy's hammer. He said a lot of naughty words while holding that. And then she just had this look on her
Oh
face of
wow.
like, oh my gosh, should I be touching this? And it was just so cute. But so there is that, like, yeah, there was this, but there was also the complicated, you mentioned patience. Like, that's actually a great opportunity to be a witness of patience for your kids when they are holding the flashlight, when they're, doing those things.
Hmm.
So as a dad, sometimes with that experience for me, sometimes that's a wrestle with me, not to go back to that experience of fatherhood that I had, and sort of, if I can quote the immortal words of the prophet Ice Cube, check myself before I wreck myself, you know, um, because
Oh
I don't want
man.
to be that witness. I want
Yes.
to be more the witness, like what you're describing your dad was.
Yeah, it's taken me a long time to realize that that's what was going on, and to go into the same words and avenue that you were talking about with your dad's hammer. I remember splitting wood with my dad,
Mm-hmm.
sledgehammer and wedges, And so we had some logs, and I'm like, I need a sledgehammer. I need some wedges. Dad, do you still have those wedges? Because I know you don't use them anymore. Can I have them? So they're now in my possession. And my youngest, Luke, he's like, I want to help you
that's
split
awesome.
wood.
Yeah.
So I got him a little like 5-pound sledgehammer, and he loves to just try to split wood. And so it starts the wedge, and then he does get bored and tired, and I get like frustrated, and I'm like, oh man, you know what? Why am I getting frustrated? I was the same way like that, you know, like hit it a few times and then run off and do something else, and it's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay.
That's one of the hardest things too about being a dad sometimes is they're not where I am, and I have to be more patient. Like,
yes,
of course he's not going to be able to chop as much as I am or fully understand what it means by take out the trash, but don't drop the trash along the way, you know, and pay attention to these things.
Yes.
So there is a patience that's needed there, and it's hard to be gentle sometimes when those things repeat. I don't know if you have that problem as well, like certain behaviors that you always say, don't do that thing, or maybe instead of saying don't do that thing, you might say this is the right way to do it, but it still keeps happening.
Yeah, I struggle with that constantly about that's not how we sit at dinner at the dinner table. And is that allowed at school? No, you would never sit that way at school. So why is it okay here? You know, and the next day, same conversation.
We don't punch our brother during prayer. You know, that sort of thing. Yeah. It's hard. What role do you think, as you reflect on your experience as a dad, how generally speaking, how often do you reflect on that, your own experience with your father? And how does that reflection on that shape how you parent in a general way?
The only thing that I really try to think about and compare is my temper, and I need to keep that in check. I know my dad, I love him dearly. He's got a temper, and I know I have that. And I've blown up at my kids, and I know I need to keep that in check. So that's the biggest reflection that I've had over my parenting. Like, I don't want to be that angry.
Right.
And it's over stupid little things.
It always, yeah. I would agree with that as well. Like, as I reflect on that, sometimes I have to remind myself, again, it kind of is that check yourself before you wreck yourself kind of idea. We have a tendency to go back to be our parents, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are those things that we need to, because it's the same for me. Sometimes I can have a bit of a temper and get very frustrated a little too easily, especially with repeated things. But it's in those moments, it's important that I pause and reflect on, okay, this is what was said to me. It hurt. I don't want to do the same thing. It's hard, like in the midst of that, and I've given the advice before in marriage discussions, always pray the Our Father, because it kind of is a natural check. What is my role as a father to help build up my kids, to help edify them? And there's that line in there, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And so like snapping at my kids in a way that really isn't loving and isn't patient, like, whose kingdom am I building? I'm building my own, and my selfishness and my anger. I'm not building the Lord's ultimately in that. I'm actually causing them hardship in the long run. And I try to do that. Honestly, I think I'm probably only batting about a 250 on that.
Hey, but if you're batting that's a Hall of Fame bat right there.
I suppose, but I could be overly generous. It's probably more like a 177.
Okay.
But I don't know. That is a difficult thing. But I think it's the important thing with that too is acknowledging it that's a problem. Like, you just called it right out. We both can't get better if you don't actually admit it and recognize it.
Right. Admittance is the first step to healing.
Yeah, for sure. So again, just kind of reflecting, especially in your early days as a father, what are some lessons that you would say you learned pretty quickly?
Well, I would say, after several children, they say it all the time. You hear it all the time. Every child is different, but it's, oh my goodness, every child is different.
Oh yeah.
And the family members, I love you, but you undersold that boys are different. than
Right.
girls.
Yeah.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
absolutely true.
When I was told that, I
Yeah.
was like, oh yeah, of course boys are different than girls. No,
Hmm.
no,
Right.
it's like that crazy poem that upsets me about like what boys are made of. Frogs and snails and puppy dog
Right.
tails. Like there's probably some other stuff in there too.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but but yeah, that's the biggest thing I've learned.
Yeah, that's true. And you can't treat them all the same. Certainly, there are some things that have to be consistent. But in terms of discipline, we've discovered that certain things are going to be harder for some than others, and there's some flexibility. That I think of one of our kids. He has a harder time focusing. It's easier, it's easier for him to get distracted and things like that. So we always have to be like sensitive to where he is and that sort of thing. And I think for me, one of the very first lessons I learned, and I learned this actually at Mass, and we were at a church where it seemed like all the kids were like super attentive and super well behaved, except for us. Like I remember once going up to receive communion, and our youngest, he was at the time was our youngest boy, and he starts like going around, ring around the rosy around the extraordinary minister. Just kept circling around her, touching her legs, while we're trying to receive communion. And it just looked like everybody around was absolutely horrified. Of course, as a parent with young children at Mass, you always think when people are looking at you that they're horrified by your kid's behavior.
Your perception is just amplified at that moment.
Yeah. And I just remember like being so embarrassed and frustrated in that moment. And I remember at the baptism of one of our third daughter, like it was the same thing, just all over the place. And then being RCIA coordinator at my parish, and during the Easter vigil, I was standing with him. I was holding that same boy, and he kept turning off the lights in the church. And it was right as Father was getting ready to baptize the folks, and everybody's looking around and confused, like, why do the lights keep going off?
Oh, that's so funny.
And you have to think, like, was somebody like this person's about to get baptized and the lights going off? Is this some sort of sign? I don't know. It was just a weird situation. And then finally, someone screams from the other side of the church, "He's doing it!"
Oh, no.
And they pointed at my son, pointed at me, and he was turning off the light because I didn't realize I was standing by the light switch. And it was just so embarrassing. And I remember one Mass, like talking to my kids. They were really little. They were probably like 3. And I think I was being very firm with them about how they should behave at Mass. And I remember a mom of like 8 children looking at me like I was a complete moron while I was talking to them. And like months later, and especially years later, when I look back on it, I'm like, man, she was right to look at me like I was a moron, because at 3 years old, they don't understand that there needs to be some respect for their development. How can I help them behave better at Mass? How can I help them to enter into that mystery? So I think for me, that was a lesson in being reasonable in my expectations. And as a dad, I think there's a lot of value in developing an understanding of how kids are at ages and stages. Like as a dad, it's worth taking the time to maybe do some research in what's a 2 to 3 year old like? What do they need? And same thing with like 3 to 6. What are they like? What are their characteristics? What do they need? What are their developmental needs and stuff? It's worth doing that so that you can be more reasonable in your expectations.
Totally. I mean, like, I'll agree to that. I did not do that, as my wife is a teacher. So she has already been through all that. So I leaned heavily on her.
That's like home field advantage for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
It's
we all
okay.
can't have that. But while you were talking, like another thing that really popped in my head about some things I learned was the bond that your kids have with their mom. Don't get jealous of that. Like I was extremely jealous of that for each kid and for a long period of time, because I would want to hold my kids and they would scream for their mom. And it took me forever to realize like they're 9 months in to a bond and they don't know you. Just relax. They'll get to know you, and then they'll want you. And then the jokes come in of, they'll want you when they need the credit card.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, there's only one of our 6 kids that has actually been like, when they were really little, super close to me. And that uncharacteristically, that I suppose stereotypically, that it was actually one of the boys, that during those very early years he was really close to me. So yeah, I agree with you. It's not they don't what's wrong with this kid? What's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
They want mom,
It's,
and that's completely normal.
yes.
I don't know if this is true for you, but another thing that I've learned, and probably this is more that I've learned over my years of being a father, which has now been 13 years, the need to apologize often. Like if I realize that I shouldn't have talked to my kids in a particular way, or I was a little harsh in the discipline or something like that, I acted out of anger, frustration, impatience. There's a lot of value in saying, I'm very sorry for this. I hope you forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
Daddy was upset about this thing and I took it out on you and I'm sorry for that. And with that apology, you can still acknowledge it doesn't make what you did a good decision, but how I responded to that was wrong, and I'm very sorry. I think there is value in demonstrating that, seeking forgiveness.
Yes, it's also a good example to show your kids how to forgive and ask for forgiveness instead of and I'll admit, I'm guilty for doing this too, everybody. Say you're sorry. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Say it like you mean it. I'm sorry. Right. Well, it's hard. So if you demonstrate that in the moment, I think that will help all your kids to
for sure.
to actually ask for forgiveness genuinely.
Yeah. So now would be a good chance for you to apologize to your kids for inflicting dad jokes on them. I don't know if you want to take a moment to do that.
Not going to be able to do it.
I tried. Sorry. I tried. Maybe another day.
Nope.
Awesome.
Nope.
If you could give a new dad advice from okay, let me rephrase this. If you could give new dad you, so you just had first child, if you could give that person advice from your perspective now, what would that advice be?
Philly, you need to be a leader, and not just in the house, but you need to be a spiritual leader. This will lead to a lot of things down the road, and let your kids ask questions. It doesn't mean that they're not agreeing or don't want to do what you say. It's that they genuinely want to know. Right. And that's something I still continue to struggle with is being that leader. I'm the youngest. I've got 3 older sisters, and I was one of the youngest in my classes, so it's not in my innate nature to lead since I was having others lead. So I've had to gain those skills as an adult by, becoming a Grand Knight of our Knights of Columbus chapter at St. Malachy's and leading a team remotely from my home, in my home kitchen, a team of 5 in the state of Wisconsin to do their jobs. And now I'm leading the communications of the largest parish in Iowa. Shout out to St. Francis. Love you.
Yes. Yeah.
Love y'all.
Yes, for sure.
So I'm picking up and using whichever skills needs to be appropriate at each instance.
Amen. Good advice.
What about you?
As I was reflecting on that, I think, and maybe it's just where I am in my life is why I would answer it this way, but it is from my perspective now. So it would be use the time you're given well.
Ooh, yes.
Pope Francis has this great saying, and I don't know where it was. I just know it's Pope Francis. He says, waste time with your kids. And he talks about getting down on the floor and playing on the floor with the kids. And I think that would be my advice. Like the only time you should waste is the time you waste with your kids. And be a kid with them. Be a kid with them.
Yes.
And don't be afraid to be a kid with them.
Don't be afraid. Preach. Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder, especially more recently, did I have kids just so I could continue to be a big kid?
Ooh, but I'm going to steal that.
There you go. Put down the phone, leave work early, take the weekend off, and especially leave work at work. Any folks that are in ministry listening, that can be hard when you work in ministry because your work is the spiritual life, is the spiritual things. So it can be hard to make that distinction between, leaving your spiritual life at work. That's not what I'm talking about. Your spiritual life has to come home with you, and it needs to be even stronger at home, but your work itself needs to stay at work. Leave work at work. We only have so much time, and on our deathbed, none of us are going to say, I wish I wouldn't have spent so much time with my kids. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
So that would be my advice.
That's good advice. I like it.
What is the best unsolicited parenting advice you've ever gotten?
Oh, the best unsolicited?
The best unsolicited.
No one, and I firmly believe this, that men don't give other men or dads don't give other dads advice. I think it's purely women to women, female to female advice on raising kids. I don't know what it is. I think it is just how we're programmed, and it's okay. But I observed a lot. So I would watch how other parents were playing with their kids and going on bike rides. So even though that wasn't advice that they were giving me directly, I was definitely picking up on it.
I think that's a really good point, because I know there have been those dads I've seen that I'm just like, wow, I wish I was that kind of father, or I wish I could be that dad. And there's nothing saying that I can't be,
Right.
you know, but those same dads that I'm like, wow, he is amazing, have never actually offered me advice. So maybe that is a funny thing about being a man, being a father, is I think you're right. I can't really think of any time I've gotten unsolicited dad advice. Like if I've asked, how have you handled, like in a few occasions I've gotten that. I have gotten the unsolicited advice from time to time, the negative things, the criticisms. And so turning the other direction, what is the, dare I say, worst unsolicited advice you've ever gotten as a parent?
Maybe you should just yell at your kids more.
Nice.
Like,
yes.
what do you say to that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right.
Not gonna do it.
I've gotten something similar. Mine was, maybe you should spank them. It's been a lot of the, you're not hard enough on them, you know, and that's what the problem is, which that's always irritating, you know, when somebody evaluates your parenting style in front of you,
Right.
and uses that as a means to criticize your kids
Right
in front of them. That can be very aggravating.
Like, I know that that's a hot topic right there of spanking, and I was not spanked growing up. I always say that, and then I always go, oh wait, no, there was that one time, but I deserved it.
Right.
Because I hit my neighbor because he was cheating. And so I'm like, yeah, I totally deserved it. And I'm sure there's listeners out there like, no, you never deserved to do this. Like, you know, it didn't scar me. I'm okay.
Right.
You know, I'm not condoning anything. I'm not promoting anything. You know, you do you.
Yeah, and that was a pretty, as you describe it, pretty one-off extreme circumstance as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that is, it's an odd thing. I think with discipline, the most important thing is really to be patient, to be loving, and to be consistent.
Oh, yeah.
Know, and have clear expectations. I think in my own childhood, the discipline was extremely inconsistent and there was no structure. And so I really never really knew what were boundaries, what were right and wrong. It took me a long time to learn that, you know, and it was more kind of on my own. And that's not healthy. In a way, I actually think that does more harm and more damage in the long run, because then you become an adult who doesn't have a good sense of structure and consistency in your life. I don't know. That's what stands out to me. Like the answer to that is consistency, clear expectations.
And it's good to be like on the same page with your spouse.
Right.
Because if you're coming in with like totally different ideas on discipline or expectations, it can be a long struggle.
It can be. Yeah. And in that discussion about being on the same page, a discussion about how the childhood each of you had is important too. Like, what was discipline like for each other as a child, and talk about that, because those are things you have to work through as a couple as well, you know?
Yeah. You're saying that and it's like, oh man, why did Kelly and I not have this discussion before we had kids? Right. Like it probably would have solved a lot of our issues, a lot of our problems, a lot of our anger, like a lot of my anger and fights. But yeah, like the way I grew up, I'm just going to say this, you know, my mom is Filipino. So I do have that cultural, you know, you just do what you're told. You don't say no. You do the expectations. So I have that ingrained in my brain. And when I said earlier about it's okay if they ask questions, I really mean it, because that's something I need to work on.
Right.
Because that's not how I was raised. Yeah. And it's just a different parenting style. And that's how Kelly was brought up and raised. So if we were to be on the same page, it would have solved a lot of things.
Right. What role has your faith played in your relationship with your kids and as being a father?
Oh my goodness. It has grown exponentially throughout the years. I was that dad that just wanted to do the Sunday obligation and maybe be a lector. I saw my dad doing that growing up. I wanted to imitate that. And then we started having kids, and I got deeper into my faith, which just grew to ways that I never thought I'd be doing. Like, I know in your podcast, you talk about not really sharing what you do for Lent. One year for Lent, I decided to read the Bible to my girls. We picked a gospel, and then we just kind of read it every day through Lent. And it was fun to hear them as we would go to like grandma's house and bedtime. You would hear down the hall, "Dad, we need the Bible."
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
And I'm like, this is cool. And now, they still read and they're still faithful and growing. I've read the Bible to my youngest. He's in 2nd grade right now, and he loves it, and he asks questions. And thankful to Father Mike and his Bible in a Year podcast, because if I had not listened to that, like, a lot of questions would not have been answered.
Yeah.
And it would have been like, good night, son, just go to sleep.
Yeah.
So thank you, Father Mike. And the art, like, I see your studio back there, and it's beautiful. I would not have said that, or I might have said that years ago, but I wouldn't have meant it.
Right.
Because I thought it was weird.
Right.
But now I'm in like, oh my gosh, we need more art in our house.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting around in my office, I'm like, I need art here.
Right.
And it's just trying to figure out what to put in.
Right. Yeah. I can relate to that in a lot of ways. I think even as you mentioned our chapel / studio here, I think of me maybe even a year or two ago, the idea of giving up a room in our house for this intentionally. Like, there's hardly anything in here other than it looks like a little church in here, but we have 6 kids, and I gave up my game room, which was a huge sacrifice, by the way. And the idea that that would have been hard for me to do even a year or two ago. But now it's like, this is the place I go in our house for quiet, for peace, and it's needed. And yeah, like the stations hung around it. It's beautiful. We need it, so I'm kind of with you in that journey, understanding that. I think the role our faith has played in our family life, there's one story that comes to mind, and I think this is probably the most powerful example of that. We had a miscarriage a couple years ago, and it was in February of 2020, and it was hard. And it was the first time that pregnancy, it was the first time we had never actually told our kids right away that, baby was on the way. And so there was a little bit of guilt that day, when we woke up, like, why didn't we say anything? And it was also the first time we were genuinely surprised. You're like, oh, like, obviously we know what causes babies. When you have 6 kids, people are always asking you, what causes that, We love our hobbies. Again, back to that where I started. But so there was a little bit of guilt in there and not sharing. Well, we decided that day, that morning when I got home, we're going to tell the kids because they need to know why mommy and daddy are going to be a little sad for a few days or probably longer, especially for my wife. So there was that moment at the end of the day where we sat down with the kids and explained everything to them as best we could. And you could see the moment of them processing the excitement of there was a baby, and then coming to realize, and it was a gradual kind of slow, when they finally realized, but we lost the baby. There was a lot of sadness and grief and crying. And that, I think, as a parent, that is, and as a husband, as a family, that's probably the most difficult situation that we've had as a family. But then there was like this sharp turn almost immediately where everyone got up, they went straight to the table, and they started drawing pictures of Miriam, of their sister in heaven, and them going up to meet her in heaven. And it was just so beautiful because it was like a reminder for us that as Christians, we place our faith and hope in Christ. We don't grieve as those without hope. I think that's the best example of how, for me, how our faith has shaped our relationship with our kids. That's the thing that really stands out to me there. I know that's kind of a heavy topic, but it's just a really powerful healing, almost immediate healing in that. I mean, there was still grief, but man, to see their faith in that moment. My kids are always teaching me stuff. I don't know if your kids do the same with you. God's always teaching me stuff through my kids.
To me, it's more of your faith isn't enough yet. It's not big enough. I'm astounded just because I kind of compare my kids' faith to how I was growing up. Going to Catholic school, K through 8th, I was nowhere. I knew Bible stories. I knew Sundays were the Lord's Day and that was church day and pretty much that. But to see Mila and Madeline just ask, hey, can we go to adoration sometimes?
Wow.
And Mila has gone to the Benedictine College summer programs these past 2 summers. And this year she's like, hey, can we say night prayers sometimes instead of the normal like routine? Like it was really beautiful when we did that.
That's beautiful.
And I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like, why am I not there?
Yeah.
I know I've come a long way, but I'm supposed to be leading you and you're leading me. Yeah, I got to step up. And then, to see some other kids who are, some of my other kids who are in our house, whom I love and care about deeply, just beg for sacraments and get, grow in their faith, get baptized, get First Communion.
That's beautiful.
Here I almost cried the other day. We went and visited Kelly's parents in the Davenport Diocese. And there they do dispense precious blood. And one of our kids has not received that because it's not done in our diocese. So to see her walk up into communion and receive it for the first time, I almost teared.
Right.
To see that, that's something she wanted.
That's beautiful. Jesus says, have faith like a child. There's a humility in their faith that they just want Jesus for Jesus' sake, without any expectations necessarily. They just want to see Jesus. I think she's now 4. My wife corrected me because on the last episode I said 3, but she's now 4. And
it's okay. To me, that's a dad thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Like I go by grades.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I've got 2 sophomores, I've got 2 8th graders and a 2nd grader.
And if you ask me how long I've been married, I would say it was a long time. I'd have to really think about how many years that was.
I have to do the math, and then Kelly's like, Philip, it's been this many years. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But my 4-year-old, she's just always so full of joy. And I think about this one, and there's a blog post about this too on our website. But, one morning we're running late for Mass. Nobody can find their shoes. Somehow the boys' pants, they outgrew them overnight somehow.
Oh,
and
it's
like
that happens.
You're trying to get everybody ready for Mass, and we're going to miss the Mass time we want to go to. So then we end up at this church that I really didn't necessarily want to go to that morning, but everybody's being crazy, and it's like, shut up, we're trying to go to church. Have you ever had one of those mornings and everybody's grumpy because of the rush, but you're trying to go in and be holy,
Yep.
And we get to the church, we get to the Mass, and I find myself thinking, man, nobody looks happy to be here. Now remember how I said I came into the Mass. Nobody looks happy to be here. Oh, the music's really terrible this morning, blah, and oh, that homily didn't make any sense. What is he even talking about? And, all these sorts of things, these negative criticisms. And I remember, the question, nobody seems happy to be here, kept sticking with me, And then it was during the consecration prayer. Zoe, who's only, she's probably just above my knees in terms of her height. She's not very tall. She's little for her age. And she lifted up her hands and started grabbing, like kids do, pick me up, that universal sign to pick me up. And she said, I can't see Jesus. I can't see Jesus. And meanwhile, through this whole crazy morning, she's super joyful, as she always is. So I pick her up, and then she's just immediately so happy. But she kept saying, I can't see Jesus initially. And when I picked her up, it was almost like the Lord said to me in that moment, and neither could you. I was so upset in my own little world and all the things I was upset about that I couldn't see Jesus, who was right there in front of me in the sacrament, but also right there in front of me in the priest, in his homily, and in the people around me, and the people that, even the question, why is everybody so unhappy to be here? No, I was the most unhappy person, and I couldn't see Jesus in that unhappiness. And it was my daughter that taught me that, that faith like a child. Through all that stuff, all those things might have been true. The music might have been rough. People might have been grumpy. But she still saw Jesus. And I think of what her perspective was that morning. A 4-year-old, what's their point of view when they're standing on the floor? All they can really see and smell people's butts, and that's kind of how I was. I was only focusing on that worst thing. And even though I picked her up, it was actually her that picked me up so I could see Jesus. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
totally.
That's how it is.
Totally.
I totally relate to what you're saying with your kids wanting to go to adoration, desiring the sacraments, I need the Bible. That's so beautiful. That's awesome.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It was like those memories, I will always keep them close to my heart.
Mm. If you had any final thoughts for dads out there on being the leader of the domestic church and being dad, what would that be? Embrace
it. It is our Levitical duty to build and pass on the faith in our homes. It's not up to the priest. It's not up to the Sunday school teachers. It's not up to the religious ed teachers. It is up to us. And it is not because of the times. It goes back to biblical practices of Levitical teachings that it is our duty to pass it on to our kids. And, embrace. If you think it's a struggle, I struggled too. Right. We're all struggling. It's all our own faith journeys. And if you were struggling, reach out to someone and ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. Jesus asked for help. God asked for help. He asked 12 men for help.
And even Jesus, like when you say embrace, the next word that comes to mind is the cross. Like embrace the cross of being the high priest of your home. But even embracing that cross, Jesus still had Simon of Cyrene. So
that's another. Oh wow, I never thought about that one. So where he needed help.
Yeah, so we need as dads, we need our Simon of Cyrene to help us carry the cross of fatherhood.
And it is being a dad. It's a heavy cross to bear. You don't think about it. Like anyone can have kids, but it takes. I hate to say it. It takes a man to be a dad.
Yes, for sure. And embrace the cross like Christ for the joy that is set before you. And that joy is Mila and her desire to go to adoration. And I need the Bible. Man. You're doing the real work. You're building the kingdom.
I'm trying. Yeah. Now the challenge is to keep that fire going.
Amen.